Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's great to have you here. I'm Una English. I am a coach and digital nomad, and on this channel I talk about how you can really achieve the best type of balance while working, while doing everything else that you love to do as a digital nomad and remote worker. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and giving this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate the support. Okay, so without further ado, let's get stuck into it. So in today's video, I am going to be diving into how you can actually work as a digital nomad or remote worker. So specifically going into how you can actually plan your work day, how you can actually get work done, as well as balancing that with all of the other things that you might want to do on your digital nomad trip, or if even you're just working from home, but you want to find that good balance with what you're doing. So the first thing that I do whenever I'm planning a digital nomad trip is I actually map out the key most important things to consider when booking a place, when actually deciding whether or not I can even go on the trip, and who I travel with and how I communicate that. So this is really key here. So it's hard to kind of find that balance if you haven't actually created the space for yourself to have that balance in the first place. So what I actually do is when I'm planning my trip, I make sure that the place that I'm staying is actually a place that's conducive to work. Now, this doesn't mean that it has to have a desk or a dedicated workspace or anything like that. For me personally, I really don't care about desks. In fact, I've always worked in all kinds of different places like that, but there are a couple of things that are very important for me personally. So as a coach, obviously I'm doing a lot of private calls and I need to have private conversations with people and meetings. So I need to have a place that actually has a door that closes so that I can be separate from whatever else is going on in the place that I'm staying. So whenever I'm looking for a place to stay, that is really the first thing that I consider is, does this look like a place where I can also work, have that quiet place where I can focus? So one thing to really mention is, does it have a door? I know that sounds ridiculous, but a lot of Airbnbs actually don't have doors on the rooms, especially if they're studio. And if you're staying with someone else, that's something to bear in mind, that if you're booking a studio literally means it's all in one room. So you want to make sure that you can also find a way to work together. Another thing to mention is a lot of digital nomad co-working spaces are not really laid out or designed for people that have lots and lots of Zoom calls. They sometimes have call booths and things like that. But if you're someone who, maybe works as a coach or something like that, doing a call from like a metal box maybe doesn't look the most professional, and often there's people walking behind. So even though they're not aware that it's a soundproof box, I find that, people aren't necessarily comfortable with that. So that's just something to bear in mind. Now, if you just have a regular job where you're not always on Zoom calls, this wouldn't pertain to you specifically and probably doesn't matter. But that's the first thing that I really consider is like, where am I staying and is it a place that I can really work in? Now, the second thing that I really kind of bear in mind and consider when I'm booking a place is, does it have strong Wi-Fi? And so like, I don't necessarily need to have fiber optic Wi-Fi. If you're doing lots of video editing, downloading, uploading, that kind of thing, you might need a really, really strong fiber optic connection. But I do need a connection that's actually strong enough to be able to hold, lots and lots of Zoom calls. It's not actually limited in terms of amount. So i.e. it's not limited to, you can only have like 1 gigabyte or something like that. And this is something that I really look up whenever I'm booking a place. And I also double check with the hosts if I'm booking on Airbnb, because I've had experiences where I've booked a place and they've told me it's fiber optic Wi-Fi or it's really strong Wi-Fi, and then the Wi-Fi box is like on the top floor or on the bottom floor, and we're on the top floor and the connection doesn't work. So this is something I would recommend checking the reviews of the place, seeing what people are saying about the Wi-Fi, reaching out to the host, double checking. I just want to confirm that it has good Wi-Fi. And then the third thing is always having a backup. So when you're working remotely and you need to make sure that you're present for your Zoom calls or things like that, it's absolutely crucial to always have a backup when it comes to Wi-Fi. So I also do a lot of research before going on a trip to make sure that I would have some kind of backup that I can rely on, or even multiple backups. So I do, for example, always Google, are there co-working spaces in the vicinity of where I'll be staying in case the Wi-Fi goes down or the electricity goes down for whatever reason, and I can go to that place and work. I also look at how much a SIM card will cost in that location and if they can have some kind of SIM card with unlimited data. So if I'm traveling within Europe, actually the carrier that I have here in Ireland allows me to travel and have 8 gigabytes per month, which is typically enough for about a week of calls. But that wouldn't be something that I would be relying on long term because the connection wouldn't be necessarily as strong as Wi-Fi. But it is something that I always have a backup just in case. So speaking of backups, so another thing to consider is when you're traveling to different countries, if something you have breaks, or if something gets lost or stolen, it's important to always have a backup in terms of devices. So I always travel with 2 devices on which I can work. So I have my laptop, which has all of the information that I would need for working on there. And I also have my phone, which actually is connected to Slack, and I can access all of my meetings on my phone. So if for whatever reason my computer isn't working or the connection isn't working, I can always connect to everything on my phone. And I also make sure that I have all of my devices backed up and everything is stored in a cloud. So for whatever reason, if all of my stuff gets lost or stolen, I can actually use a friend's device to connect to be able to work. So the other thing that I make sure that I always have whenever I'm traveling is I make sure that I have a backup in terms of charger and things like that. So there's a few ways that you can do this. If you're going to a place where, say, for example, it's your friend's house, obviously they would have a backup charger if you have the same devices. So that's often the case with me. Or I'm often traveling with multiple people who would have the same devices as I do. So there in and of itself, you already have a backup. But if, for example, you're traveling by yourself, I would actually bring a backup computer charger. I would bring a backup phone charger, or just a little cable if you have a MacBook so that you can plug that in. Because if that breaks, it can be really hard to source a new one, especially if you're somewhere like in the middle of the jungle in Costa Rica, or you're in Nepal or India or something like that. So that's something really important to bear in mind. Now, the other thing that I really consider, again, before going on my trip is the time zone that I'm going to be in and whether or not it's compatible with the work I have going on. So for me, primarily, most of my calls are in the Americas, so either in North, Central, or South America, or they're in Europe. So I'm aware that I need to be in a time zone where I can accommodate taking a lot of calls. That will be accommodating, say, Eastern or GMT, CET time zone. And therefore, if I'm traveling to a place like Australia or somewhere in Asia, I have to bear in mind that that would mean that I would have to take calls very late at night. And so that's just something to bear in mind and something to plan into your schedule. And if you're doing a shorter trip, it can be totally fine. I've also even done longer trips. So for example, when I was living in Nepal, so I lived in Nepal periodically for 5 to 6 months over the stage of 6 years, and I was doing my entire degree online. So I would have 3 times a week or 2 times a week classes at midnight their time. And it's quite exhausting to do that. So if you're doing it every single day, personally, I wouldn't find that sustainable, but I know actually a lot of people that do that and have no problem with doing that. So the other thing that I consider before going on a trip is actually what projects am I working on currently in terms of work. So what projects do I have to complete? What are the deadlines? And how much time are they realistically going to take me to complete? So if you're working remotely and then you're employed by your employer, obviously they don't care that you're traveling, and you need to make sure that you're hitting whatever KPIs you have. Or if you have your own business, you want to make sure that you're hitting your own personal KPIs so that you're not falling behind on the projects that you're working on that you've already committed to. Now, if you have your own business, you might have a bit more freedom here to plan. So maybe to kind of see, okay, what really are my top priorities and am I willing to compromise on some of my goals so that I can actually have more flexibility when I am traveling as a digital nomad. Now, what you can do with this is I literally like to map out on my calendar exactly how much time each thing will take so that I can actually visually see it in the Google Calendar. And I even actually do this with personal plans as well, so I can see how full my day is and what's realistic for me to accomplish. So now you're on the trip. So now that you're on the trip, what can you do on your trip to make sure that you're balancing your workday in the best way possible? So I like to, regardless of wherever I am in the world, I like to plan my work week weekly and also monthly. So usually at the beginning of the month, I kind of visualize what projects I have working on, and I make sure that I'm planning that and mapping that out accordingly. What I also do is I look at on a weekly basis, okay, what are the different calls I have booked in? What are the different things I want to do in terms of social or activity based? And I literally map it all out in my calendar. I also make sure that I have a good buffer. So especially if I'm in a new location and I don't know how the Wi-Fi would be, for example, I always make sure that I have a good 30-minute buffer to be able to connect to the Wi-Fi, be able to get myself situated, get myself a tea and all of these things before starting my work session. So once I've started my work session, there's a couple of things I do that really help me to focus and stay productive. So one of those things is, and this is something that I've been doing for a really long time, is to pick some type of ambient music to basically block out any surround sounds. And especially if you're in a place like a hostel or you're in a co-working space, or perhaps the person that you're traveling with is doing a lot of calls, that's something that you can kind of block out and get some sort of noise cancelling headphones. And so I'm always listening to ambient kind of music. I just listen to stuff that's on YouTube, and that's something that can just help me get into a focus mode. Something that I have used as well is Brain FM, and that's something I would really recommend. I've always just watched some of their free videos on YouTube. You can pay for a subscription. I'm sure it's amazing. I just never have seen the need for it because they just have those 3 free videos that I just listen to over and over again. But that's something that really, really helps me stay focused while I'm working. And the other thing to kind of bear in mind while you're traveling is to do activities that help you center and focus before your workday and at the end of your workday. So I typically have a startup ritual, which is that I sit down, I kind of look over the different calls I would have for the day, look at, okay, what do I need to know about these people? I would take down notes so that I'm prepared and I can look at that while I'm doing the call. And at the end of the workday, I would look at, okay, what are the tasks that I need to still complete for the rest of the day or the rest of the week if I'm not doing a split shift, and I spread those out accordingly. So that's what I do to plan my work day. And in terms of how I actually make sure that I achieve that balance, so like I mentioned, this is something that you really learn intuitively with time. It's not something that might not be easy in the beginning, but it's something that's actually a lot easier than a lot of you guys think. I know a lot of you guys feel like, oh my gosh, how could it possibly be possible to travel and work from anywhere? But I really wanted to reassure you and encourage you and say that it's 100% possible, but it's really important to be aware that you have to compromise. And the last thing I wanted to talk about today is compromise. So this is something that I really have to do whenever I'm on my digital nomad trips. And if you're a friend watching this video, you'll know that sometimes I can be very cutthroat with certain things. So if I'm working, I'm working. Even if my friends are drinking, or, they're in the pool, or they're going to the beach, or they're going to see a beautiful waterfall, I really recognize that I need to prioritize my work on top of everything else. When I'm traveling, and it's, unless there's an absolute emergency that I have to address, I really prioritize the work. And how I actually do this in terms of compromise is I just remember my North Star, essentially. So what do I mean by that? So there's a reason why I work so hard, and it's that I'm really looking to achieve financial independence and be able to retire before the age of 67. And I want to be able to progressively over time work less and less. So where I am right now in my life at age 28, I work really hard and I am saving as much as possible. And what that means is I'm often compromising. So for example, I don't go on all the trips I would want to go on, or when I'm on a trip, there are certain things that I don't buy or don't do, or certain experiences that I don't go on, because I'm making sure that I'm still saving what I really want to save, while also doing these things. So that does mean that there are a lot of things that I essentially miss out on, but I'm really reminding myself that the reason why I work so hard and the reason why I'm choosing to do this is because I'm going to be able to have more and more flexibility as life goes on. So that is really what keeps me going and what keeps me focused, helps me to kind of, even if I have to get up really early to do a call or stay up really late to do a call, I remind myself that I've chosen this lifestyle. I've chosen a lifestyle where I can really make the most out of my life, make the most out of my experience, but that also requires making compromise. And sometimes that's also with work projects as well. I have to be honest with what I can realistically take on and what I can't take on. So that is it for today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. I hope that you found it beneficial, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. If you have any questions about anything that I've covered, feel free to drop it in the comments box. And if there's any other types of videos that you would really like me to create, just let me know. I hope you have a wonderful day and see you soon. Bye.